And so, in this next segment, we are going to talk some science. Here comes the science music. You guys ready?
Ooh, look at that science
We're
music.
being very contemplative.
Very science. Get your beakers out and everything.
Yes.
Now, here's why I want to talk about this tonight. I don't know if you guys feel the same way. Maybe, Chris, you feel the same way, something similar.
I feel lots of ways.
That is true. There are often times when I'm praying and I get in the middle of the prayer and I just think, is anything happening right now? Like, does God hear me? Is there something going on in the world? And I've had wildly inconsistent experiences with prayer. I've seen moments where a church has prayed for one person fervently, and then miraculously they came back healed, no sickness, gone. I've seen the opposite of that as well, where people pray for someone fervently and nothing happens, and I get this thought deep in the back of my brain, like, what, is this real? Is God just flipping a coin with these prayer requests? What's going on? And tonight I want to talk about what happens when we pray, because I think the question, does God answer prayer? And how does God answer prayer is kind of a fool's errand. I don't think we can fully know that answer, if how or when God answers prayer. So tonight, I want to talk about something different. Instead of talking about what God does in the world when we pray, I want to talk about what God does in us when we pray. So I've been doing some research, and I found this doctor named Dr. Andrew Newberg. He's done a lot of studies.
Dr. Andrew?
It's not my pseudonym. It's not me trying to be a scientist.
Oh, okay.
But his name is Andrew, so I respect him for that. But Dr. Andrew Newberg, he's done a lot of studies on the brain, and take my mouse. And he wrote a book about spirituality and prayer, what happens in your brain when you pray. And he found some interesting things, so I want to share this with you guys. He did a lot of brain.
Are you about to lay like a bunch of mad science?
Yeah, this is going to be a lot of science jargon, so like buckle your seatbelts, guys. It's
we're
going to be
talk
intense.
through it. We're going to understand it all.
So I'm going to do my best to try and explain this without it being like all crazy. So he did these brain scans of people when they prayed, and he found something interesting. People who pray regularly have an increase in gray matter in their prefrontal cortex and their anterior cingulate cortex. Yeah, okay. And you're probably thinking like
Tell
me.
us what that means, Andrew.
What does that mean, Andrew? Here's what it means. That's the area of the brain where we find compassion, empathy, and love. So he discovered that people who pray regularly have an increase of activity and an increase of gray matter in that part of the brain where we feel love, compassion, and empathy. And so those people start to exhibit those tendencies more often as well. So he found a direct link between people who pray to a loving God on a consistent basis and having that part of your brain that experiences love and empathy having an increase. But not only that, he found something else as well. Those who pray regularly to a loving God have lower stress levels and lower blood pressure. And prayer to a loving God will result in less activity in the amygdala. What's the amygdala? The amygdala is the part of your brain that where more of our like primal instincts come from, like fear, anger, like those more like inner deep down emotions. And so people who pray regularly to a loving God experience hatred, fear, anger less. And then I found this out, which I thought was really interesting. Here's what I think is the best part. Those who pray or contemplate on God's love for 30 minutes a day, develop an asymmetrical thalamus, which means one side of the thalamus is bigger than the other. Here's what that means. The thalamus, among other things, is where many people think we find our identity. It's the source of your identity in the brain. And they discovered that when you pray regularly, your asymmetrical thalamus, God's love, how you see yourself and others increases, and God's love almost becomes a part of your identity, how you see and experience the world. I don't know about you, that sounds pretty cool.
Andrew, I'm going to tell you something about myself that is going to shock you.
Nothing shocks me at this point.
I have found that in my own life and just with my personality that I am not always the most compassionate and empathetic person.
What?
I know, surprising. But here's what's been interesting, which is why I find it fascinating what you just said. I feel like each year of my life that I do ministry, that I grow in my faith, that I grow in my understanding, I find myself naturally becoming more empathetic
Right.
and more compassionate than the previous year. And so what you're saying is literally as I pray and as I come to know God, science is showing that my brain is changing to become more compassionate, more loving, care more about others, and to understand my identity in the context of a God who loves me.
Right. We are literally starting to discover that God and praying to God changes your brain. And now, your brain is always changing, but praying to God on a consistent basis has considerable amount of change on your brain, how you experience love, compassion, and empathy, and it changes you. And this is important because how often does the New Testament, the writers tell us again and again that God, through Christ, will change us, and it's true. So I don't know how often God answers specific prayers. I can't answer that, but I do know this, that when I pray consistently, God changes me. And if that's the only answer I get, it's good enough.
Dude, science is awesome.